Hey, Greg Moulton here from Matrix Motion Fitness Studios, and we are bringing another at-home workout option for you. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on your abdominals, and we're going to do more of a progression through this. So it's not necessarily going to be like a follow-along type workout, but just some considerations that I want you to go through when you're doing any abdominal work. We'll start kind of from a baseline foundation, make sure that you guys are stabilizing the abdominals properly, and then we can kind of progress from there and kind of work into some more challenging options down the road. So the big thing that we're looking for is creating control and stability throughout your abdominals and ensuring that your pelvis and your spine are able to do what they need to do, and that you've got the ability to move appropriately. So the first thing that we're going to start off with, I'm going to have you just laying down on your back. Getting myself all set here. Hips are going to be bent just slightly. Your knees are bent, your feet are flat on the floor. And the very first thing I want you to do actually is just creating a contraction within your abdominals. So you're trying to squeeze and kind of tighten up the abdominals. The big thing I want you to think about here, well, there's two things. A lot of times I see people, they're wanting to either push their stomach towards the ceiling or they're wanting to suck their belly button in towards their back. And neither of those truly engage the abdominals the way that they're supposed to. So what you're wanting to do is just create this, what's called this intra-abdominal pressure, this tension, this squeeze in the stomach. And the way that I typically will get people to think about this is imagine like somebody's just about to punch you, and they're about to punch you right in the stomach, and you don't have time to react. All you can do is just tense and brace yourself. So if you do that, then that should create this contraction in through your stomach and create an opportunity for you then to progress through everything else. So the first thing I want you to do is just hold that contraction. I want you to try to breathe through it while maintaining that contraction. That can be a challenge. So you want to make sure that you don't lose that contraction while you're breathing, and you're still maintaining that steady breathing pattern while you're holding on to that tension there, right? So that's kind of first and foremost what I'm wanting you to do. So from there, we can get into a leg march, essentially. So you're going to create that contraction in the stomach, you're going to hold on to that position, and you're going to just slowly lift one foot off the floor, and then lowering that slowly back down, and you're going to transition over to the other side, and then back down. And if you have to reset that squeeze in your abdominals in between each one, that's fine, go for it. If you can maintain that contraction and do kind of a series of them or a cluster of them together, then go for that as well. The idea when you move the legs though is that you're not letting your hips and pelvis dip. You don't want any rotation coming through your spine. You want everything to stay perfectly still. So squeeze the abdominals, lifting that one leg, keep that contraction in there, lower that leg back down nice and slowly, transition to the other side. And when you make that transition, that's when most people are going to find their pelvises are going to kind of teeter-totter back and forth. And you want to make sure that stays as solid as you can possibly keep it, right? And just nice and steady back and forth from there. Beautiful. So from that point, the next thing I'm going to talk about is engaging your abdominals, going into almost like a partial crunch. And I don't like using that word crunch, but we'll kind of head in that direction. I want you to take your lower back, and you're going to try to flatten it out into the floor. So your pelvis is going to tilt up just a little bit, right? Your rib cage is going to be drawn down toward your pelvis, and you're kind of pulling those 2 points closer together. And we're trying to squeeze and hold the abdominals at that point. So the harder you push into the floor, the greater the contraction that's going to come from the abdominals. You're just going to maintain that positioning. So you don't have to do hundreds and hundreds of sit-ups or crunches in order to get this abdominal workout in. All you have to focus on is engaging and actively squeezing those positions as best as you can. So just flattening out the back, squeeze the abdominals. Again, the harder you push the back down, the more the abdominals are going to contract, and that's creating that workout for you, okay? Once you get through that point, the next thing we can actually focus on then is with your legs straight. Now, I typically do them with my legs straight. If you find like it bothers your back, then you can keep the knees bent. That's just fine. But we're going to add in a side bend to this. So I'm not necessarily pushing my back into the floor completely, but I'm creating that contraction in my stomach, and I'm gonna go for a bend to my right side. So I'm trying to take the bottom part of my rib cage on the right side and bringing it down towards the top part of my pelvis on the right side. I'm gonna squeeze those 2 points together. So I'm holding my abdominals in, I'm gonna do that bend, I'm gonna hold and squeeze, I'm gonna come back up. We're gonna do the same thing off to the other side, right? Hold and squeeze, and then coming back up again. And it's really trying to engage kind of the obliques and a little bit of those side bend muscles throughout your trunk and spine and that are gonna stabilize you through that, right? So that'd be kind of the next step beyond there. Once you've kind of gone through all those, we're gonna go back to that marching kind of position. So we went through this march where you're stabilizing your pelvis. So if you wanna make this a little bit more challenging, what I'm gonna get you to do now is bring that leg up. You've engaged your abdominals. So now we're gonna stretch that one leg out in front of you, hold that just for a couple seconds, and then come back in. And it's important now, make sure that when you stretch the leg out, you don't let your back arch, you don't let your pelvis change positionings, you're keeping your abdominals engaged and you're holding onto everything as best as possible through that. So nothing should be moving aside from that one leg. The rest of your body should be nice and solid, all right? So once you've gone through those, again, to make it more challenging, one thing I'll say about this then, before progressing to that next step, you want to make sure that you have total control over the previous one. So these are done in a progressive manner. So if you're having a hard time with those marches, right, then don't progress on to that next exercise until you can do that one completely perfectly and nice and solid. So the next progression to this now is going to have both legs up and you're going to stretch one leg out. So now you've lost the stability of having that leg, the opposite leg down on the floor, okay? So when you stretch that leg out, it really wants to drive that extension in through the spine and that tilt of the pelvis going in the opposite direction. And so you have to really anchor the abdominals as you stretch that leg out, okay? And then our next step kind of from there is gonna add in the hands. So we're gonna do your opposite arm and leg. So my right arm, my left leg, they're gonna stretch out. And again, we're decreasing the stability factor. We have less parts on the ground to help anchor us. So your abdominals have to do more at this point to work and stabilize yourself. And again, trying to maintain as much control and stability as you can going through that. You don't want to go too fast and let your arms and legs go kind of haphazardly back and forth. You want to maintain as much stability as you can through that. And then the last thing that I'm going to say to work on, at least just for right now, is a bit of a rotation to this. So everything that we've done, we've tried to minimize the rotation. We've tried to anchor ourselves nice and solid. And this next one, I'm going to add in a bit of rotation. So you're going to have your knees bent. Arms can be out to the side a little bit here. And you're going to allow your pelvis to kind of roll to one direction just a little bit. You're going to hold that just for a couple seconds. So engaging with the obliques and your abdominals, just kind of holding that spot. You're going to come back into the middle. You're going to roll back off to the other side. Now, we're just going bit by bit with these rotations because I don't want you to rotate so far to the point where now you can't keep that shoulder down on the floor. The moment that shoulder lifts is the cue that you have now rotated too far and that your spine has maxed out its rotation and now basically your whole body's just moving with you. So you're wanting to ensure that you only move as far as feels comfortable and as far as you can without having that shoulder, that opposite side shoulder, lift off of the floor. And just this nice and slow motion kind of back and forth with that pause on either side. Okay? Now there's a lot more that we can do from an abdominal standpoint, but that is what we're going to start with. We're going to use that as kind of our intro to all of this stuff. Before we progress into those more challenging exercises, make sure that these ones are set and are perfect and have total control over it. And then our next video, we'll get into some more complicated abdominal work from there. Hopefully that helps.